you should see something come up and make sure you approve that that it's being recorded. So I am Elliot Lawrence. I am the educator in Lucas County, and we are going to go on board the USS Intrepid today. So the USS Intrepid is a Navy aircraft carrier, and it's really cool. The first one of these I ever did 3-4 weeks ago was the US or the International Space Station, and it was very popular. A lot of kids like that one. I think this one's really neat too because it has very similar look about it. There's a lot of really cool buttons, and it's something when I was a kid I would have loved because of all the buttons and the dials and the screens and everything. So that's one of the reasons why I picked this one to do. So with that being said, we'll get started. Right here, we are inside of the pilot house currently right now. And I'll kind of spin it around a little bit and give you a 360-degree view of that pilot house. And pretty cool. The captain is actually the person responsible for directing the ship. They spend the most time in the pilot house. Right in front of you, see the big giant steering wheel. And then all the other houses are all the other controls are kind of housed around that as well. So it's kind of like if you're driving a giant car. Everything is positioned around you, and you can kind of have access to everything that you need access to. Unlike driving a car, driving an aircraft carrier is much different, obviously, because it's much larger and it takes a full crew to be able to actually drive the boat. Navigation equipment, including a compass repeater. A compass repeater it's used that repeats the location from separate of the main compass. So if you think about if you're steering a ship, there's not a giant windshield here, and so you kind of have to know where you're going, and the way that they do that is with the compass. It provides the information about the Intrepid's location, and it's just outside the navigation bridge. The captain observed the flight deck and gave commands using equipment on the bridge. So the first place we're going to check out is the engine order telegraph, and that is staring right in front of you, the little circle that came about. That is the engine order telegraph. The engine order telegraph allows men in the pilot house to instruct sailors in the engine room to power the engine at particular speed. And the Intrepid's maximum speed is was between 33 and 34 knots, which is roughly 38 to 40 miles per hour. And its average speed was about 15 to 20 knots, which is about 17 to 23 miles per hour. Not a fast vessel by any means, pretty slow actually, but if you think about how large an aircraft carrier is, you can't really move something that large that fast. There's just not the technology to be able to do that. And aircraft carriers don't need to move fast because they're meant to have aircrafts land on them. Next up, we have right beside it, we have the helm. And this is an older picture that I pulled up here that it actually shows it actually shows when the USS Intrepid was in operation. Sailors turn the helm or the wheel. So if you imagine steering wheel in your car, it's called the helm in a ship, to change the angle of the rudder. Now the rudder is at the back end of the ship, and that's actually what steers the ship. And typically qualified helmsmen enlisted sailors who were often 19 or 20 years old steering the ship, not the captain. The captain usually didn't steer the ship. The captain made the orders. And so it was usually the lower, the sailors that are just starting out was kind of the helmsman job, was kind of the first job that you'd ever get as that. So it's pretty cool. How awesome would that be to be the helmsman? I think that'd be a pretty fun job to be able to steer a steal, not steal. Don't steal a ship. To be able to steer a giant ship like that, it'd be pretty neat. Next up, we have the plotting board. And so that's over here. It's something that, with modern technology, we kind of use plotting boards don't really exist anymore. They kind of do, but they're not used in the same
that work?
that they were when the USS Enterprise was in operation. And so this is the plotting board. It shows task group formation, which is groups of groups of ships controlled by one leader. And it also has the real-time locations of ships surrounding the Intrepid. So it's kind of like, it's almost like if your GPS, if your GPS had other cars that you'd be able to see all around you. That's what this that's what the plot board is for. So sailors gathered this information using radar and other methods, and sailors stood behind the board to update it. They learned how to write backwards for this job, which is kind of interesting because you're putting clear glass, if you could tell by that picture. And so you're writing backwards. So when you write backwards, you're writing backwards so that the person facing that board was able to see it front. And so anybody that used the plotting boards had to learn how to write backwards at the time. So it'd be pretty neat. Next up, we are going to go over to the chart house. So the chart house is on the navigation bridge level. Under the guidance of the ship's navigator, crew members determined Intrepid's location and plotted the ship's course using manual and electronic navigation tools. Charts, drawing instruments, and reference books were stored here as well. Personnel could observe the position of other ships, lighthouses, buoys, and other aids to navigation from platforms surrounding the bridge. This is a different level than what we were just on. It's usually underneath the bridge, and this is where the tracking is. So before GPSs were really popular and GPSs were widely available, you kind of had to track stuff manually. A lot of ships now can reduce the size of a lot of these rooms and definitely reduce the size of the equipment that are in these rooms. So the first up is the Dead Reckoning Tracer, and that is back here. So the Dead Reckoning Tracer, or they call it DRT for short, is a navigation tool. Crew members entered the ship's starting position in the DRT, and the DRT automatically updated the ship's position using data about the ship's course and speed. It's like a satellite navigation. It's like a GPS system that we have right now, but it was before there were satellites available. So this kind of was like a manual plotting of how to keep track of where everybody was and keep track of where lighthouses were and buoys, because you don't want to drive a massive ship into an area that might have some problem being able to navigate around stuff. And so first, the other thing too is, this is pretty cool. These are they kind of look like recessed light or can light fixtures, like track lighting that some of us might have in our house, but they're not. They're actually speaking tubes, or they're also sometimes called voice pipes, and they're located throughout the area. Has anybody used that old can, the can and a string method? Have you seen that before? Maybe on some cartoons and stuff, on movies, where you tie two cans together and one person talks and the other person holds on to the other can, and you could supposedly hear people back and forth. It doesn't work the greatest, but these voice tubes are exactly what that is. These actually do work really good because it's a solid tube, and so literally you talk into them, and the solid tube will allow you to hear what other people are doing. And so that's the speaking tube. And then the sea surface radar is back over here. The sea surface radar shows the location of all the ships around, and this is really important if they're going into battle. If this cruiser were going to go into battle, it's really important to have that, obviously. And the radar can actually detect the position of enemy and ally ships up to 25 miles away in any direction, so 360 degrees in any direction, 25 miles away, they can figure that out. It looks like somebody might be writing on this. Could you not do that, please? I don't want to disturb the view of what we're checking out here. Thank you. Okay, next up we have the Admiral's Bridge, and this is so commonly referred to as the ship's bridge or the flag bridge. And so the flag bridge is the admiral controls the group of ships. So you have one ship, you have a ship captain, and then you have some other you have some other all of the ships are in a group, and the admiral actually allows that to happen. So the ship that carries the admiral is designated as the flagship. On occasion, Intrepid serves as a flagship. During these periods, the admiral's bridge, or the flag bridge, was reserved for use by an admiral and members of his staff. He is responsible for the overall strategy, movement, and coordination of a particular group of ships. So the admiral is kind of, ship's captain is in charge of one ship, admiral is in charge of a group of ships. Sometimes the admiral does have place on some other ships. They kind of float in between, not literally float, but they actually go in between different ships. And so if the USS Intrepid were used as a flagship in a voyage, then this would be where the admiral would be positioned. Now, the USS Intrepid is actually, it's no longer a real, it's not a real working Navy ship anymore. It once was, but it isn't anymore. It's actually a museum that you can walk through. And so that's why there's the partition walls. They are, those partition walls in the glass are, those are there because people walk through this area. They normally would not be there. They would normally, that would be open, and this would just be a large open area. So that is the Admiral's Bridge. Up first, the first item we're going to look at is right there. It's called the Squawk Box. And the Squawk Box there shows a picture of the Admiral using that. They're part of an intercom system similar to what you have in your school. So there's usually an intercom, in most schools have intercoms. This is a similar principle. There's a bunch of speakers located throughout the ship, and then you have control of it right there. So these were crew members or crew members directed their messages to different areas of the ship by controlling various switches. And so if you look at it right there, you can actually see that there's a whole bunch of switches there. So whatever switch you'd have down or up, whatever position it was, the on position, that would then send your signal to whatever area that would be for. So hold on one second. I want to recording again. The ship, one question was, the ship is in, I believe it's in the New York Hudson Bay. I believe it's in New York, if I remember right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'd have to check on that. I'm pretty sure it's in Hudson Bay though. Okay, so back to this. So the pilot landing box, the Navy installed a closed circuit TV system called PLAT in the 1960s to record flight operations, and crew members viewed the launch and recovery of aircraft on this monitor. So it's kind of cool. They can view what's going on outside on the deck, where the landing of the planes are. Okay, so that is the end of. Let me get to the next. This is the Combat Information Center then, and first up we have the radar men. So radar men were trained for their position, And radar equipment allowed radar men to track friendly and enemy ships in aircraft and surrounding areas. The men watched their screens like the ones pictured here. It's kind of hard to look at. It's kind of amazing to see what they actually had to look at in order to see what that what it was like. Because if you look at that right now, it's really kind of challenging to see what means what. And all these radar men, they really knew, they had a really complex knowledge of what those little dots meant and what was enemy and what was not enemy. This is pretty cool too, solar powered telephone. This is something that we don't see a whole lot. And the solar powered phone, a lot of times we think of cell phones and that kind of stuff. These are actually phones that were powered by solar. And so they had obviously cords that went up to a solar panel. And these were used to only communicate while you're on the Intrepid. If the ship lost power, that's why they were solar powered. So if the ship lost power, then they could have conversations back and forth using that solar power. Each telephone changed sound pressure from the user's voice and electronic current, which was then converted to sound at the other end. It's pretty amazing technology that they used even way back when. Status board. Here's a really good picture of the status board, and the status board. Let's see if we can get rid of that. Yeah, that's status board was provided information to the air traffic controller and the CIC officer and plotters. Different information is listed on different status boards, but there was always at least one for air contacts, planes, which are air contacts are obviously planes, and then one for surface contacts, which is ships. So that was all about how to be able to control what or see what's all out around you. Okay, let's get to the other. There it is, the other screen real quick. I think this might be the last area. No, I think there might be. The squared on ready room is what we're looking at right now. If you look at over here, it's pretty neat. It kind of looks like a little conference room, which you'd see as a conference room. And so this is where pilots came to prepare for flight missions. When the ship was built, these rooms were located near the flight deck, which is the runway. And pilots waited for orders from the squadron. What did I say? I said squared on. The squadron commander. The commander informed pilots about wind, weather, and ways to stop the enemy. After mission, pilots reviewed the results in the ready room. Between flights, the room offered sanctuary where pilots could relax and socialize. So first up we want to look at the podium. The podium. Combat missions were difficult and stressful, and pilots needed to be fully prepared. The squadron commander used maps and plotting boards to prepare pilots for their mission. He stood at a podium similar to this one and gave instructions on how to accomplish missions. This is pretty cool. We have a lot of different chairs, and we really packed a lot of guys in that one small room. It's pretty neat to see. Pilots had one of the most stressful jobs on board the Intrepid. Ready rooms were designed to be comfortable as possible. Padded chairs were built and desks for taking notes and reviewing flight results, and plenty of room for their coffee, of course. And the senior aviators were given priority to the front seats. So you see this, a lot of the pictures of the guys there. Most of those guys were all senior aviators. Next up, we are going to go to, hold on a second. Go to the next area in the ship. And this one is out. This one is almost the bottom layer here. Intrepid had 2 anchors, so that's what you're looking at, these giant chains right here. You spin it around, we can actually see where the chains go under, and the giant rope, it's pretty neat. They were used to hold the ship in place. The ship's massive anchor chains entered the ship in the forecastle, contraction for forecastle, word for forwardmost part of the ship. Here, sailors use machines to raise and lower the anchor chains into the water. Each anchor weighs about 30,000 pounds. It's pretty crazy. So first up, we're going to look at the anchor chain, and we've kind of been seeing that already. There's some old picture of the anchor chain there. Each link of the anchor chain weighs about 130, 150 pounds. So pretty much an average human being was about the weight of an anchor or an anchor chain. I mean, the longer of the Intrepid's 2 anchor chains reached as long as 1,000 feet. Only a short part of the chain can be seen on deck. The rest is stored 6 decks below the chain locker. It's pretty crazy, 6 decks. Okay, so next up we have sailor art. Sailors working in the anchor chain room made their space their own by painting images like the anchor. Other paintings in the room include the American flag and the Roadrunner cartoon character. Many examples of sailor art survive throughout the ship still. So this is called the windlass, right where that white dot is pointing. The sailors working here use the windlass, a tool to raise and lower the anchor. To raise the anchor, sailors prepare the windlass engine, release the brake, and then raise the chain bit by bit. While raising the anchor, sailors cleared ocean water and mud off of the chain to prevent corrosion. Next up, we have the galley. So this is where the sailors ate. This is where this isn't where they ate. This is where the sailors, where the food was provided. So this is like the cafeteria, and the Intrepid's cooks prepared approximately 7 tons of food every day to feed a hungry crew of over 3,000 men. It's pretty crazy numbers. There are 2 large galleys, which we just saw, fully equipped with the same grills, fryers, and ovens found in a large restaurant. After waiting in line, crew members took their trays to one of the mess dining area where that were close by, and then sailors got to relax while dining, more of a relaxed environment, especially for holiday meals. So first up, we're going to go check out the where you take it to clean up, and that's dishes and washes. Dishes were washed in areas called the sculleries. New sailors were often assigned to work as mess cooks, but didn't actually cook. They cleaned the mess, galley, and scully areas and prepared food to be cooked. Although the Intrepid had industrial dishwashers, sailors scrubbed many things by hand. You ever have that your parents, even though you have a dishwasher, your parents make you wash stuff by hand? How terrible would that be? Okay, next up we have the chow line. There's an old picture from when the USS Intrepid was operational. Crew members ate cafeteria-style meal times. Men waited in chow line. Sailors took steel trays through serving line and selected their food and returned to forward mess to eat. And that's very similar to how a lot of us, eat in school. Here's a menu from 1944. This is kind of what you'd look at, what some of the meals would be like on board the USS Intrepid. Pretty not bad. This was a Thanksgiving Day menu, so it's a little bit better than what a normal menu would probably be on a normal day on the USS Intrepid. A little bit different than what a normal meal might be. You have turkey, candied yams, potatoes, cream of asparagus soup, apple pie a la mode, which is apple pie with ice cream. Sounds pretty good. Okay, next up, we are going to go to the next area in the ship. I think that actually might be, I think the galley is the last one. Let me check real quick. Yep, the galley is the last one. So that was the last one we had. Pretty cool. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I do apologize for technology. I think I might know what the problem is with my iPad. It's the second week it's done this, and I started using it a little bit differently than the first week, and I didn't have any problems the first week. So I'm going to go back to what I was doing the first week and make sure this doesn't happen again. Once again, I do apologize for the downtime. And also a little bit less exciting of a field trip when you have some people might like that, actually. Some people like going to field trips and reading a bunch, but that does kind of block from the view when we're doing it virtually, so I do apologize. Does anybody have any questions? I do see somebody ask if I do work at the museum. I do not work at the museum. I work for Ohio State University Extension as a 4-H educator, and that is part of this. That is the education that we're working on, or we're doing today. Virtual field trips happen every Friday. If you're new to this, from 3 o'clock until 4. It's usually about 3 to 3:30, I guess. It usually doesn't last a whole hour. Yep, we do a lot of different programs. If you're unfamiliar with 4-H, we do a lot of different programs. If you want to get connected with your 4-H in your county, at least in Ohio, it's really easy. Every website in Ohio, every county has an extension office. The website is the county's name .ohio.osu, and that can connect you with any of your county's extension offices. I do remind you, please, again, please take the evaluation at the end, and I'm going to post it again real quick, and do let me know if you have any suggestions or anything, aside from not having my iPad not work halfway through. I am aware of that. So that I'm going to fix. And try to remember does anybody have any questions I should ask?
No.
Yes. Anybody have anything? I thought I heard somebody.
Just said no because I didn't think anyone.
Okay. Gotcha.
What time, can I ask this question?
Yeah.
What time was this ship in operation?
So this ship was in around the 1940s. I have to look at the exact date. 1940s, 1950s. I'm not sure when it was decommissioned. I'd have to check real quick. I'm looking it up real quick here. Hold on a second. So it started and it was built in 1941, and it was decommissioned. So it was turned into the museum. Well, I'm not sure if it was turned into the museum, but it was decommissioned in 1974. So it hasn't been a working ship for quite a long time, it was a working ship for a while. The Intrepid, it is docked on the Hudson River in New York City. I was right. I wasn't for sure on that, but yeah, it is. They turned it into a museum in New York, and it's pretty cool. I think I was actually in this museum a long time ago, going through this VR. Going through this virtual field trip, it reminds me that some of this stuff looks familiar. So I remember being on a ship in New York a long time ago, and I think it might have been this one. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for